Hey there, my fellow designers and creatives. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to another video in this series on redesigning a mobile app. In the previous video, we went ahead and looked at the architecture of the Fold Money app, and I showed you how we can go ahead and fix it to make it a lot simpler. Of course, we need to dive into a lot more details in order for that to make sense. But in this video, we're going to go ahead and focus primarily on creating user personas and how I would go ahead and create personas for redesigning a mobile app like this. So without any further ado, let's get started. Now, I'm going to start off by saying that user personas are actually very ineffective. Now, what that basically means is if you go to Google and search for user personas, the theoretical knowledge that you get, the images that you see on, Google Images, and pretty much everything that you see is probably a very bookish and a theoretical aspect. And that's not how designers or experienced designers think about personas when making design decisions, right? That's not the way to do it. Now, I'm not saying that user personas are not important. I'm saying the way it is taught or the way it is presented online is pretty much the most ineffective way. And basically, what you want to do is focus on user stories rather than user personas. Now, user stories are sort of a subset of user personas. User personas are super top level, and a lot of people and a lot of designers as such don't even think about personas at a top level. They always dive down into the smallest details, the most granular levels of personas, and that's how they make design decisions. And of course, I'm going to show you all of that in this video. Now, to quickly explain what a user story is, it's basically a sentence or a paragraph or, whatever, a phrase that is structured this way. I want to do this so that I can make this decision or take this action. So there are three things over here. It is the person, it is what they want to do, and it is why they want to do it. Now, an action could even sort of be doing something or even making a decision, right? Let's say you open an app and you look at something, that is also an action or a decision. They don't necessarily have to do anything on the app. They can just open the app and look at something. Let's say, for example, they want to go ahead and look at whether they got their salary or not, right? It's just looking at some information and seeing if they got their salary or not. That's about it. You're not really taking an action as such. That's basically taking a decision of whether, hey, did I get my salary? Yes or no? That's about it, right? If I didn't get my salary, I'll go ahead and, check with my company. If I did get my salary, I'll start spending it because I have to make some expense, right? So it's not necessarily about taking an action inside the app. It's about knowing and getting information as well, right? So we're going to go ahead and focus on user stories, and every design decision that we make is going to be focused on this. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what sort of job you do. It doesn't matter where you stay. All of those things are irrelevant. What we want to do is, why does somebody want to do it, and what is it that they want to do? It's very important to think about personas in this aspect in the early stages of your career, because the moment you follow a bookish approach and a theoretical approach, your entire foundations are going to fall apart. Now, there are 4 ways that I would primarily classify on how to create personas, right? Or, user stories in this way. Now, the first way would be to use surveys. Now, of course, these methods can be used to understand the problem statement as well. But in our case, let's assume that we already have the problem statement and we know what the problem statement is. It's about, tracking expenses, making sure you're up to date on your finances, things like that. So we have an overall view of the problem statement, and user stories sort of help you understand the granular level problem statements as well, right? So if you go back a slide, so basically, if I were to repeat this, I want to do this so that I can make this decision or take this action. Now, basically, this ability to take this decision or find some information or take this action is a need to a problem that users have. So the moment you create a user story, you are defining who the user is, and you are also defining what problem they have. So that's the biggest advantage of user stories. All right. So coming back, the first way is surveys. Now, according to me, surveys are the most ineffective ways to gather information if you don't know how to ask questions. In fact, I even have a video on my YouTube channel where I review many surveys, and most of the surveys don't make sense because a lot of the questions are irrelevant and some of them aren't framed in the right way, and you're not going to get responses the right way if you don't ask questions the right way. So I would highly recommend people to not use surveys anymore. I mean, it's totally up to you, but for me, I find it to be a very ineffective method to gather information. All right. The next is secondary research. Of course, this helps. This is research done by other people, right? But it works in only niche use cases, mainly because the users that you might be targeting might be very different. So you just sort of can't copy paste other people's research. Even if you do take some inspiration, you will have to do your own amount of research. So it's secondary research is again something that I don't really recommend. The third one is user interviews, which is basically one-on-one interviews where you have a conversation with someone. This is for me the most effective way to do it. And of course, this works in most of the use cases. Again, depends on the type of information you want, but it should be helpful irrespective of the type of information you want and the analysis you want to make. So, user interviews, having one-on-one conversations with people is definitely, the best way to do it rather than to send out surveys. Now, the last thing is using ChatGPT. Now, using ChatGPT to make decisions for you is the wrong approach to do it. ChatGPT is only going to give you some sort of a starting point, and I'm going to show you in this video that you can't base all decisions based on ChatGPT, and you have to apply your own common sense and combine that with the user interviews if you did any user interviews, and then go ahead and formulate things. ChatGPT is probably going to solve 20% of your problem. You then have to go ahead and use 80% of your common sense and brains and skills to map out the entire thing until you reach 100%. Now, for this particular problem statement, I didn't do any surveys, I didn't do any secondary research. In fact, I didn't even do user interviews, mainly because I myself am a user of the app and I have very strong needs and I use the app for a lot of reasons. So I sort of have that innate knowledge about what I want to do with this app. So I'm sort of like a perfect target user itself. So I can sort of think from my perspective as well and make sort of decisions because I've reached that stage where I have to, use the app and, have a lot of expenses and incomes and finances that I have to sort of track, right? But I will also use ChatGPT. I'm going to show you how ChatGPT can help, and I'm also going to show you how it can be very ineffective. And, sometimes you can't get the information that you need, and then you have to use your own common sense and brains in order to go ahead and formulate everything and make complete sense out of it, right? So with that being said, let's jump into ChatGPT and see how this works. Okay, so I'm going to leave a link to this chat thread that I have with ChatGPT, and it's pretty long, and you can go through it. I'm going to take you through every single thing. I'm going to show you how I went ahead and sort of try to get more clarity on the answers ChatGPT gave. So the first thing that I did, I just said, is create detailed user stories for users of a expense and income tracking app. Okay, and it gave me 5 user stories. All right, so 5. So, they've created 5 different types of users. So the first one is a freelancer. And I'm going to quickly go through all of them. I'm not going to go into the details of it. You can go ahead and check everything out. So it says, as a freelancer, I want to easily track my income and expenses so that I can manage my finances effectively and ensure that I'm meeting my financial goals. Now, this is super vague because it says manage my finances effectively. What do you mean manage? What is the definition of manage? And meeting my financial goal. What does that mean, right? And then we have ACs. ACs is basically acceptance criteria. And so here it says the app should allow me to categorize my income based on different clients or projects. Now, when I went through all of them, all of these clarified only 2 things of the user story. It is basically who the person is and what they want to do. So basically, they want to categorize their incomes based on different clients or projects. Now, what was missing here is the why of it. Why do they want to do it, right? That is very important to understand. So what I did is I just went ahead and rewrote the question and I said, can you rewrite the same acceptance criteria by mentioning what the user wants to do and also why they want to do it? All right. And then we got a little bit more clarity. All right. So here things started to make a little bit more sense. So again, it's the same freelancer. Now, essentially, I don't care who the person is. It is basically what they want to do. So track income with precision. The app should allow me to meticulously categorize my income based on different clients or projects, providing a granular overview of my revenue sources. So here, the what is basically meticulously categorize the incomes into different clients or projects. And the why is basically providing a granular overview of my revenue sources. Now, this is sort of okay. We can sort of accept this even though it's a little bit vague. All right. The why of it is, a little bit vague is basically what I'm trying to say, but this is more about an overview of how much you have. It is basically taking a decision or maybe gathering information itself and not really making an action, taking an action as such, right? So what I did is I took this and added it in Figma. So here I wrote the app should allow me to meticulously categorize my income based on different clients, projects, providing a granular overview of revenue sources. Now, I have removed the freelancer as a persona because in the end, I actually just care about what the person wants to do and why they want to do it. Doesn't really matter who they are. Okay, then I should be able to input and categorize my various expenses. Now, in this case, inputting information is not something the users have to do because the app is automatically going to do it. But we can just ignore the input part. So I should be able to input and categorize various expenses such as office supplies, utilities, etc. for a detailed understanding of where my money is going. Now, this again is a little bit vague, right? Of course, it's pretty obvious that you want a detailed understanding of where your money is going, but why exactly? What do you want to do with that information is still something that we're sort of missing, right? But it's okay. It's a pretty decent, reason as to why user wants to do it. So then I went ahead and added that as well. I should be able to input and categorize various expenses such as office supplies, utilities, etc., whatever. Okay. The app should provide a clear overview of my net income after deducting expenses, empowering me to assess my profitability accurately. All right. Now, for this particular app, there are going to be a small percentage of users who care about things like profitability, right? But for other people who are just normal people, for them, they don't care about profitability, but they might care about savings rather than profitability, right? So technically, profitability and savings is sort of the same way if you sort of break this into two personas. For a freelancer, it's profitability. For a regular person who just has a 9-to-5 job and, has a normal family, it's basically, savings that matter the most. But in the end, like I said, because the essence is pretty much the same, profitability is the same thing as savings, it doesn't matter who it is, the information is going to be pretty much the same, right? But do we have to go into the granular level and differentiate both of them? We can look at that a little bit later, but for now, this is basically what we have. So I went ahead and added that as well. The app should provide a clear overview of my net income after deducting expenses, ensuring profitability accurately, right? So this is fine. All right. Then I should be able to set financial goals. The app should notify me when I've close to reach those goals, ensuring I stay on track with my financial targets. Now, this is again pretty vague. Can you give, because it hasn't mentioned an example of a financial goal. Is it like, this is how much income you want to earn? Because if you're a normal salaried person, you can't have those financial goals where you want to reach a certain threshold. Maybe a financial goal could be ensuring that you don't cross a certain amount on expenses. So basically budgeting. Now, Fold Money doesn't really have the concept of budgeting, and so I'm also not going to dive into it. We're just going to be redesigning what we currently have. So the concept of budgeting and all of those things, I'm going to sort of ignore completely for now and not consider that in the redesign whatsoever. Right now, I did go ahead and ask ChatGPT a follow-up question on meeting financial goals. We'll look at that a little bit later, but for now, let's just keep this in the back of our mind. Right. So we got 3 important points which make a lot of sense. All right. Then you have a small business owner, which is again very similar to a freelancer if you think about it. So here again, ChatGPT is giving the same persona. There's not much difference between a freelancer and a business owner, especially for this app, right? Of course, when you think about taxation and accountancy and laws and things like that, it becomes different, but that's not the purpose of the app, right? So the app should support multiple accounts. Now, of course, Fold Money already does this. So, and this is more of like a product feature, and this has nothing to do with design as such. So we can ignore this. Back integration, of course, this is how Fold Money works. So this is also not relevant. Customizable reporting. So reporting features generate profit and loss statements, balance sheet. Of course, this is not the sole purpose of the app, so I'm going to ignore this as well. And then tax related functionalities, again, none of this is important, so we should not consider this as well, right? So this entire user story or persona that ChatGPT gave is irrelevant for us, right? We don't need all these crazy features, and because this is not the main needs of a regular layman user, right? Now, next we have student. All right, the app should have a simple and intuitive interface, making it easy to input income and expenses quickly, especially during busy schedule. Now, again, this has nothing to do with, inputting income and expenses because the app will automatically take it from your bank account. So nothing to worry about there. I should be able to set budget limits for different categories. Now, like I said, budgeting is not something that we're going to be looking at. So we can ignore this part completely for the purpose of the redesign. The app should provide insights into my spending patterns, allowing me to identify where I can cut costs, supporting better financial decision making. So this makes a lot of sense. Analysis, because we have information regarding income and expenses, it makes sense to have that information as well. So if I come over here, I added another one, which is basically the app should provide insights into my spending patterns, allowing me to identify areas where I can cut costs and supporting better financial decision making. Right? So basically spending patterns. Now, what is this? Again, we look into that, but this is still a little bit vague. But again, we do have a what and then we have a why, which is very important. All right, then recurring transaction, it should support recurring income, monthly allowances, expenses, etc. Now, of course, this does not really make sense because we are gathering information from a bank account and, we can't really talk about recurring income or expenses at the moment because all the information is coming from your bank account, right? You can sort of categorize something as a recurring income or expense, but, you can't sort of do anything else other than that. Then you have a family manager. All right, so somebody who's like a financial advisor or somebody like that. The app should support multiple accounts. We already looked into it. Provide a family budget dashboard showing all the financial health of the household, ensuring everyone is on the same page. So the moment you bring in multiple accounts, it sort of does the job in a decent way. All right. We are not going to be diving too much into this because right now it's pretty much individuals who are tracking their own expenses. So we're not going to be focusing on you tracking everybody else's expenses. As a financial manager, this is just going to be focusing primarily on an individual that's tracking their accounts. Maybe they have 2 to 3 accounts or maybe just a single account. They're just tracking themselves, right? Budget allocation, again, we're not going to focus on budget allocation. Notification, this is more of a engineering and a product thing, not related to design. Then again, a financial analyst, again, pretty much the same thing. If you look over here, importing data from financial statements, credit card transactions, whatever, analytics tools. Again, here, this might be helpful, but again, we don't have too much information, but we can sort of think about this analytics tool. I think this is pretty much similar to what we saw in the student one, which was providing analysis. So if we solve it for the student, we should be able to solve it for everybody else, but we can dive into that a little bit later. What else? Then we've got export data, of course, exporting taxation, accountancy. We're not going to focus on any of those things, right? Now, the next question I asked was, for a freelancer persona, you mentioned about financial goals. Can you elaborate on that, right? So what would be the financial goal? So here is hitting a monthly income target. All right. So this again is for a very niche percentage, and this sort of comes under the concept of budgeting and analysis, and it's a very specific things. And most of the people who might be using this app just probably have a single source of income and regular source of income. Maybe they're even getting income from house property and salary. But again, we're just assuming that it's going to be simple people, layman people who just have simple incomes and expenses, and then we maybe probably have 20% of the user base who wants to do all these other things, right? But we're not going to be focusing too much on that. We're just going to take what we have in the app today and redesign that. Okay. Then we have reduce monthly business expenses on a certain percentage. This again comes down to the whole concept of budgeting, setting a budget for each expense. Build an emergency fund. I don't really know. Just knowing your current balance is enough if you want to think about having an emergency fund. Profitability of specific clients and projects. We already sort of saw this, right? So if I come back here to Figma, basically this net income coming down to profitability is pretty much the same thing. All right. Debt repayment goal, definitely not doing investment planning, tax planning, savings for professional development. I mean, doesn't really matter, right? So this is again sort of setting a goal. It's like a savings goal if we were to do it. But again, all of this sort of comes under the concept of budgeting and detailed analysis. And we're not going to dive into all of that. We're just going to take something really simple that we have today and fix that. Okay. Now, the other thing that I did was I said, can you dive a lot deeper into the third persona, which is basically the student, and try to provide and expand on the user stories and the needs of the user, and try to provide as many user needs in high detail that you can provide examples to. So I've just tried to pick that one persona who sort of might be the major use case. Obviously, it's not that he's a student, but it's just that they might have the same needs as a student. A simple working professional in their mid-20s or late 20s might have the same user needs as somebody who's a student. Just that the volume of transactions might be obviously a lot more, right? So here again, the ChatGPT wasn't really helpful. It did give some direction, but wasn't really helpful, right? So it says intuitive onboarding. That has nothing to do with redesigning the app. Automated transaction import, which the app already does. Budget categories, we're not focusing on that. Limited alerts, spending analysis. Now, spending analysis definitely important, and we can look into that. But as you can see, we already have this spending patterns, so we can see how we're going to make use of this. Recurring transaction support, not something that we have control over. Financial goals, splitting expenses, educational resources, so offline mode. So all of these are, basically, product and engineering features that, don't really affect design directly. Income tax guidance, definitely not helpful, right? Now, the next thing that I did is I tried to make it even more clear to ChatGPT and said, thank you. Can you focus completely on the part of income and expenses, right? So forget everything that was related to income tax guidance, offline mode, and all of these things. Just focus on the incomes and expenses. And it still didn't really give a really good, it still didn't really do a good job. So it pretty much gave the same things, to be very honest, and wasn't really helpful. And then at the end, the last thing that I did was, if the app can provide analytics and insights on users' incomes and expenses, what sort of analytics and insights would make sense, right? So we're focusing on the analytics part. Now, of course, this is not the best way to do it. You have to speak to users and understand how they make decisions. But of course, ChatGPT can just give you some sort of an overall view if you want, right? So spending breakdown by category. So of course, we will obviously do this. So we want to have category level breakdown, which is pretty obvious. Then we have income composition, the same thing as, the expense breakdown. Budget versus actual, because we don't have the concept of budgeting, we can remove this. Expense trends over time. This is definitely important. So over a period of time, how has the trend of expenses been? Visualizing that is like super important. Same thing for incomes. Then expense distribution across days of the week. Now this again is just pretty much a feature where you can track everything for different periods of time. You just need to set a filter somewhere where you can sort based on a particular time period. Could be a week, could be a specific time period, could be a month, could be a year, whatever it is, right? Top spending categories, very easy to do the moment we have the expense categories. Savings rate analysis, this is something that we can sort of look into. Now, these are solutions. These are not user stories, so which is why I'm not writing them down in Figma. All right. Now, we could go ahead and sort of understand that if we understand the spending breakdown and the analysis of the spending, we would sort of get the savings information as well, but we can dive into this a little bit later. Comparison with peer averages, we're not going to do that. Upcoming bill reminders, not going to do that. Financial goal progress, tax estimation. So all of these are really helpful, but not for this app. All right. Now, I also did something regarding search. We can sort of look into this a lot later when we focus on the search experience. But if I have to go through, it's nothing crazy, to be honest. Keyword, date ranges, category search specific, income source. So we're going to look into all of this later when we dive into a lot more details, right? So with this entire exercise of going through ChatGPT, we were only able to get 4 of them, right? Now, is this enough? Of course, this is not enough. And we need to make sense of this, because this is basically the 20% that I'm talking about. And now we're going to use our 80% of information. Now, of course, if we already have user interviews, we would have more of this. But let's assume that we don't have, and you can still use your own common sense to go ahead and, make this a lot more informative, right? So the next thing that I did was I took these exact things, all right? And what I did was I came up with some sort of a storyline, all right? So let's look into each of those. So let me just, hide this. So the first one said the app should allow me to meticulously categorize my income based on different clients and projects and have a granular overview of my revenue sources, right? Now I took that and tried to form it into a story, something that I would get from a user interview, right? So I said, I have income from salary and passive income as well. My passive income includes YouTube, freelance projects, and online courses, right? Having this breakup will really help me ensure I account for everything when I file my income tax return. Now, this is just one of the things that sort of fall under this main user story. Now, of course, you can have many of them, right? And I'm just taking one example. If you have other examples, you can definitely add it. So I took that main thing that I got from ChatGPT and tried to make it a lot simpler, something that I would get as an answer from someone if I did a user interview, right? And this is pretty much my use case. I have income from salary and I have a little bit of passive income that I get as well. And, I would definitely want to know the breakup of everything, right? Because every time when I have to file my income tax return, it becomes so complicated because I have to go through my entire bank statement of the entire year and, see what income fell where and came where, right? I have to open multiple softwares and tools and try to download the, income reports, and it's just a big mess, right? But if that can be done through an app, it makes my life a lot easier, right? So this is definitely a use case. The next thing would be I should be able to input or basically categorize various expenses such as office supplies. Now, for a detailed understanding of where my money is going, how do we make this in a more understandable way, right? So you can come up with a story like, I think I spent too much on food and drinks this month, maybe even the previous month. How much did I actually spend? I think I need to cut down the next month for sure, right? So this is something an actual person would actually say or think about, right? And so this is again coming down to the categorization of various expenses, right? So food and drinks, right? We're taking category. Another one could be, where did I even spend so much money? I made sure to cut down on food delivery, right? So basically, if I did take the example of food and drinks and I saw that I spent a lot of money, and I would be like, where did I even spend that? I made sure to cut down on food delivery. I did, cut it down. Or was it because of more groceries that I bought now that I have a roommate, right? So these are basically questions that you want, and you want information to all of this, right? So I took this and I tried to break it down, to make as much sense as I can for this thing that I got from ChatGPT, right? And this is definitely something a human being would obviously say or think about, all right? Here's another one. The app should provide a clear overview of my net income after deducting expenses, empowering me to assess profitability accurately. Now, again, here we're talking about profitability. What's important to understand is that for profitability, it doesn't make sense for everybody, right? You have incomes and you have expenses, all right? And then you have savings. Now, that could also mean that you don't even look at savings. So let's say you earned 1 lakh rupees this month and you spent 1,50,000, could be for whatever reason, maybe a medical emergency, maybe you bought something, maybe you had to buy it, right? So your savings are zero and you don't really care about the savings because you had to undergo those expenses. And so there's no such thing called profitability that you think about. There's no such thing called savings that you look at. You just look at, did I make these expenses and was it reasonable, right? But for somebody, let's say, who was this person who sort of could be, we could take me as an example or any freelancer who had something that looked like this. Profitability then comes down to the project level, right? So for, let's say, my freelance project, what is my profitability? For my YouTube, what is my profitability? Maybe for YouTube, I have a team. Maybe I bought some license. Maybe I bought some software, whatever it is, right? And for online courses, maybe I'm paying hosting. And this we would probably do at a monthly level, or could be at a yearly level, right? So for this case, profitability makes sense. All right. But for a regular use case, for a person who just has a 9-to-5 job, savings is something that makes more sense, right? So here, one of the ideas that I got was, when I need to file my income tax return, I need to know how much to declare as a business expense, and because not everything will be a deductible expense, right? Because net income could be net income regularly, just regular net income, or it could also mean, for example, taxable net income, right? So taxable net income could be different from your other income because some expenses are not deductible, but this money has still gone out from your bank account. So it could be two different things, right? But again, this is just probably 10 to 20% of the population that we're talking about, or maybe not population, the user base of this app. Another thing somebody who's, like an ordinary user would think about is, did I save enough money for this trip? Did I save enough money this month for the trip I'm planning next month, right? So maybe there you want to think about savings because you're looking for an actual value. You're not looking at expenses. You're like, hey, I need to plan my trip next month. Did I save enough? Or, maybe should I postpone my trip, right? Something like that, okay? And the last one was, the app should provide insights into spending patterns, right? So here's something where I would be like, where am I spending the most? If it is unreasonable, maybe I need to cut down and get hold of my finances. This is something that I would actually, think about. And also could be, I think I've been shopping more ever since my salary increased 4 months ago. Have I? So you want to check if your if your shopping expenses has increased over the past 4 months. This is where the concept of trends comes into picture. You can do a month-on-month comparison, right? So we're basically sort of, taking what we got from ChatGPT, breaking that down into something that's super simple. And every time we build a feature or we build a user flow, we need to come back and say, hey, if the person says that they want to check if their salary or basically the shopping expenses has been increasing over the past 4 months, can they do it with this flow? right? That's how you want to make that connection, right? I'm going to repeat that. When you design a solution or a feature, you want to come back and say, hey, because now that I have designed this flow or feature, can it solve this problem? Basically, the user has been shopping more since the last 4 months because their salary increased. Has it happened? All right. Or are they okay with it? Or is it unreasonable? How do they check that? Can this flow or solution that I've designed solve this, right? So we want to come down to the most granular level and build personas, or basically user stories. And this is sort of, in a way, a small, tiny problem statements as well, right? It's not just a persona. It is a mini problem statement if you think about it as well, right? So the next thing that I did was sort of come down to solutionizing a little bit and see what do I need to give the user as a product designer to answer this question that they have, right? So it's the same thing. I copied the entire thing and we came up with solutions. So to answer this question or to help user make an action or take a decision or whatever it is, what information do they need, right? So of course they need the overview of the total income over here, right? So income from salary and passive income together. Then you want the categories of income, which is basically salary. Maybe you got some capital gains, or you got some investments, or not investments, basically dividends, or you sold something, and could be passive income. All of that is revenue or income. And then you have subcategories, which basically was, if you got, income from investments, it could be dividend, it could be sale of investments, it could be something else. And if it is passive income, it could be like YouTube freelance projects and online courses, right? So this is like the top level solution, right? Subcategories of incomes as well, all right? Then the next one is to answer these two questions. This is basically about expenses. It is pretty much the same thing. So overview of total expenses, all right? So when you categorize expenses, of course, you have to show the total expenses as well. And then categories of expenses, and one of those categories was food and drinks. And then you have subcategories. So under food and drinks, you have, food delivery, you have groceries. I don't know, it could be anything else, right? Then another one over here, this was about the net income. So here, Fold Money has a concept of groups. So you can actually create a group for your particular business and say, hey, this is my income, this is my expenses, and what is my net income, right? So you can take transactions, expense transactions and income transactions, and then you will get a net figure at the very end. And you can do that with the concept of groups. So that makes a lot of sense. For here, did I save enough money? You can look at your current bank balance and you can make that decision. And you can also look at the savings for the current month. This is something that I'm not super clear about, or, I'm not really, confident that we need this information. Maybe just showing the current balance is enough if somebody has to make this decision, right? Because it's not that your current month savings is helpful. You will also take, your entire savings or your current bank balance that you have in order to make that decision, right? It's not just about how much you saved the current month, right? So this is something that I'm very, unclear about, or I'm still thinking about. So which is why I added this, this question mark. And finally, over here, the app should provide give insights about my spending patterns. Obviously, we have the categories of expenses. So where did I spend the most? And you also have subcategories of expenses. So this is basically, I've been shopping for 4 months, and has it increased over the past 4 months? So that for that we have the trend, right? So you do a month-on-month comparison, or if you take a year, you do a year-on-year comparison, or you take a quarter, you do a quarter-on-quarter comparison, right? So how do we provide that information, right? So if you do this much, you have a very strong base to actually go ahead and start solving things and come up with solutions. Now, this may not be enough, but this is a very good starting point, because now anytime you make a design decision, you can come here and validate. Does this flow, does this solution help the user answer this question that they have? Can it help them find the answer? Can it help them take an action? Can it help them make a decision, right? That is super important to do, right? Now, this is definitely not the theoretical way of doing things, right? When you go online and read about user personas, you're going to get a very different answers. But this is how product designers always think when they're trying to solve problems. So I hope this made a lot of sense, and it was really helpful in order for you to understand how do you take something at a global level and break that down into smaller and tiny chunks until you get something super granular. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you really love me, in the comment sections down below, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more amazing, awesome content. And I'll see you guys in my next video. So then take care and bye-bye.